How's that? That better? Hello? Yeah. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. My amazing new teacup that my lovely wife Foxy got me. Yeah, it's not bad. All right. So today, I figured we could go over some book recommendations for anyone's martial library when it comes to Chinese martial arts. Because European martial arts, there's hundreds, thousands of books out there. But when it comes to the Chinese side of things, just like when I talked about trainers, there's not really a whole lot out there unless you know where to look. So to begin with, are these two. We'll start with this one. This is the Shaolin Staff Manual from Jack Chen at ChineseLongsword.com. It is a hand-bound traditional Chinese treatise, read from right to left instead of left to right. Now this is a copy. He went and Xeroxed all the original pages. There's the Sun Wukong, Monkey King. If you can read Chinese, which I can't yet, but you can go through all the pages, and then you get about halfway through the book. It has a nice little diagram there of a snake spear, regular spear, a serrated spear, and a staff. And then it goes through each of the movements in the form. One by one page for each stance. And then back here towards the back, if I can find it, it has, where'd it go? It was on the front. It shows you a footwork diagram, where your feet start, where they end. So this, as I said in my first stream, always start with the staff. Even if you can't read Chinese, this is a really cool thing to have. Now this one, as you can tell, is read right to left. And this is the Jianjing. This is a section of Yu Dayu's book that actually is, again, about the staff, but it's also about the sword. And this one is a little bit different than that one, because you have the Chinese verses over here, and you have the English translations. And this is an amazing book. And this one will explain application. I don't know if you can see that. Application 123. So again, it shows you the Chinese verses here, English translation here, goes through all of the different movements, and then here in the back, are the actual moves of the form. So here, right here, we have 大吊式, which is the big door suspend stance. And it explains the basic stance. And then you can go back and find application number 5. Next, we have another 2 books. This man is indispensable when it comes to Chinese martial arts. So first we have Classical Yang Tai Chi Sword. Complete form, application. We have introduction about the Chinese sword. That's always nice to see because not a lot of people are going to do that. We have some pictures and illustrations. Showing you how to find the balance of your sword. That's incredibly important. If you're going to be moving around, you need to be able to know how. Now this page I love because this you don't see a whole lot of with Chinese sword, but if you practice Japanese sword, this is going to look incredibly familiar to you. This is how to sheathe a jian. Now, as always, I happen to have a sword right here. Nothing slows down a form or anything faster than trying to find the hole in the scabbard. So having someone basically explain to you the proper way to sheathe a jian is just an amazing thing. And when you have han jian like this, your scabbard is kind of recessed in the center here. So you don't actually need to use your thumb, which is a good thing because this is sharp on both edges, unlike katanas. And you can just simply rest the sword against the shape of the scabbard, slide down until you hear it click. There you go. But having a page that tells you with pictures how to sheathe your jian, that's just unbelievably cool. And again, if you practice Japanese arts or any kind of, katana, that's going to look incredibly familiar to you. Then we go through a little historical about the different kinds of jian. You have Zhou Dynasty here. And Qing Dynasty. Like I talked about in my first string, we have different types of jian. And a nice little hook right there. You got a snake style blade. Those are incredibly rare, but you can find them. Talks about the tassel, the jianshui, the sheath. This is an amazing book. I love this book. Little bit of training before you use the sword, the so-called sword finger, how to grip the sword at the beginning. And then it's going to go through some breathing exercises. All of this before you even get to the actual form. This is just training. You don't get to the actual form itself until chapter 3. And he's going to show you each move and its in between. It's transition between here and here and here to here, describing the stance underneath each picture. That's somewhere. I didn't think to grab that one. I have the very first sword form I ever bought back in 2001. I went to the International Wushu Federation and bought a book on the, I guess, Olympic level Wushu sword form. The problem with that book was it was entirely in Chinese. And it had pictures of each move of the form, but not the transitions between. So when I was learning that form, not being able to read what I was supposed to be doing, it wasn't until 2015 maybe when I saw a YouTube video of what the form was supposed to look like before I realized I was doing it completely wrong. So that was an entertaining thing. And then we have Tai Chi Secrets of Yang Style. This is more of a historical book. But in my opinion, if you don't understand the history of what you're doing, then you're not doing it right. History is just as important as forms and application. This book is going to tell you about each of the founding members of the style. I'm going to tell you a little bit about each person. Secrets of application. We have a nice little poem in Chinese down here. This is more of an oddity when it comes to learning Chinese martial arts, but it's just as important. And for the not quite sword inclined, we have The Way of Archery. 1637 Chinese military training manual. Justin Ma and Jie Tian. This is going to teach you Han Dynasty archery. This is a not quite reproduction, but more of a explanation of Chinese archery with a nice little section here about Gao Ying, who was a Ming Dynasty general who kind of founded this particular style of archery. It's also called Gao Ying archery. We have introduction. Again, you have Chinese and English. It's going to explain to you what full draw means. It's going to explain where your anchor point should be and what an anchor point is. It's going to show you the proper body alignment. Going to show you the proper way to draw the bow, starting from just below your eye line, holding the bow at an angle through the draw to your anchor point. Going to tell you about how to release the bow, because in most Chinese archery, you're not using the 3-finger method that most Europeans use. You have one under, split finger. In Asian archery, you're using these 2 fingers right here. You'll have a thumb ring that sits on your first knuckle, and most of them will have a little lip right underneath this joint right here. That lip, you set the string on that, wrap this finger around, and you're holding all of the weight of that bow on mostly these 2 fingers. If you have these 3, they're just down like this. So when you want to release the bow, it's all done with your index finger. All you got to do is release that, and the force of the string is going to pull this finger out. So you're using 2 fingers. This is also an incredible book for history, for archery. There's a nice little image of a thumb ring. You can see the little groove right there where the string sits. That's a very, very good book as well. And then we have this. This is written by the Teahouse's very good friend, Nick Tockert, over at the Historical Fencing Guild. Now, why do I recommend this book? It's very, very simple. See what I did there? Simple. That book, while Nick primarily teaches European martial arts, this book is going to go over the most basic things when it comes to the sword. It's going to go through basic cuts, stances. We have stick figures in here. Right there. Stick figures. It's going to go through how to fight against a spear. Just because this is European martial arts, there's only so many ways that a body can move. And so focusing on simple beginning introduction, that's a very, very good idea. So I would highly suggest picking up that book. And if you're so inclined, you can also pick up the other 2 books, the Simple Spear and the Fighting Axe. But this, for any kind of martial arts, just like that staff manual, this is a primer. It's going to teach you the basics, and then you can build on that with any of these other books. Now, when it comes to this one, should have mentioned this before. If you go on Jack Chen's website, ChineseLongsword.com, find the section for the Jianjing. It tells you that this book is for advanced to intermediate students. I slightly disagree with that, because if you have a foundation, even if it's just the very beginning of a foundation in any kind of martial art, you're going to be able to read this book. You're going to be able to understand this book. And you're going to be able to apply from this book to whatever else you're learning. Because this, again, actually is about the staff. And the staff in Chinese martial arts is the basis for everything. Always start with a staff before you go into any other weapon, because every single thing that you can possibly do will be based in some kind of staff movement. That's why I bought this upside down. I can't read Chinese yet. I can read a little bit here and there. But being able to look through this, being able to look at these stances, I can't read a word of this. But looking at this, I can vaguely understand what they're trying to convey. And as a little bonus, Chinese Swords, The Evolution and Use of the Tian and Dao by Martina Sprague. This is also a history book. This is going to tell you, with pictures, about the evolution of Chinese swords. We have the Zhou Dynasty swords. And then we move through to Han Dynasty swords, Three Kingdom swords, Sui Dynasty swords. Now, if you look at this bottom picture right here, that is actually the basis right there for L.K. Chen's Dragon Dynasty Sui Dao. It is a Sui Dynasty Dao with a ring pommel with two dragons chasing the Pearl of Wisdom. So again, this is history, but there's nothing wrong with learning a little bit of history now and then, is there? All right. So those are some recommendations of mine for books that people can pick up. They're not 100% necessary, with the exception of this one. I'm going to go out on a limb here. And this is not just because the person who wrote this is a close friend of mine. That book, I'm going to say, is a necessary purchase. If you're going to start learning sword, if you're going to start learning any kind of martial art, start right here. This even has a glossary telling you what certain words mean, even if you think they're unnecessary. Going to tell you what a dagger is. Going to tell you what a cut is. You think, oh, of course, we know these words. We know what these words mean, but it's still a good thing to have on hand. This one, if you can read Chinese, I highly suggest picking up. If you can't, it's a little expensive for something that's just going to sit on a shelf and be kind of cool to look at. The Jianjing is pretty expensive for a book. Now, again, it's hand bound, which is really cool. I wish that it was left to right instead of right to left, like the staff manual is. That's about the only. That thing is about $48 before tax. So it is fairly expensive for all of us poor sword people. Nick's book is not terribly expensive, and it's really a good book. So, and we also have one that I got for my birthday last year. And of course, it is also Tai Chi sword. I think most people are noticing a theme here. This is an actual form book. It's also Yang style. We have, again, history. We have the sword of Guojian. That's a whole history right there by itself. We have the different parts of the sword. How to hold the sword. Very similar to the Gaoying archery. You're mostly using like 3 fingers. This finger and this finger are not terribly important. Tells you the wrong way. Holding too high, holding too low. And then we have the form itself. And again, you're going to have a picture and you're going to have an explanation underneath. And we have transitional moves, but those don't really have as much explanation. It's going to show you the, let's see if we can get that to focus up there. Going to show you the name of the movement, picture, explanation. It breaks it into sections, which a lot of form DVDs are broken into sections. All the way through to move 32. And of course, you have the closing movement. And this is mostly just the form. A little bit of history in the beginning, but most of it is just the form itself. Now, learning a form from a book is difficult. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. If you don't have explanations of where your body is supposed to go, what it's supposed to do, and you just have pictures, you're not going to learn. It's a sad fact, but it's true. You're not going to learn. Like I said, I made that mistake with the International Wushu form, doing it wrong for about 15 years. 14, 15 years. I think I still have that book around here somewhere. But a lot of people are going to tell you you can't learn from a book. You can, as long as the book has the proper explanation, proper amount of explanation. If it's just pictures and vague descriptions, you're not really going to learn anything. But books like these that really go in depth on the transitions between the movements, those are actually really good things to have. It also helps to have a training buddy, I guess is one way to put it. Someone who can be reading the book along with you and watching you, because you're not going to be able to pull the book out and look at the in between when you're moving. When you're actually trying to do these movements, you're going to be doing them by yourself. So if you have someone else also reading the book with you and they're with you when you're trying to practice, they can say, wait, no, that didn't look right. Hold on. Let's go back and try that again. So reading from a book is possible. Or learning from a book, excuse me. It is possible, but it's going to be more difficult. If you can find a book that also has a DVD, or if you can find that particular form that you're learning from the book, if you can find a YouTube video that also goes through the form that you can jump back and forth, that's usually a pretty good idea. So there's all of my book recommendations, and we're about 32 minutes in. Don't really see anybody in the chat but Foxy. That's slightly disheartening, but I suppose next we can talk about something that is also, see, don't forget the great resource of YouTube for learning. If you can find a YouTube video of the form that you're learning, do it. There is, I'm pretty sure, the same video teaching the 24 simplified Yang Tai Chi form that Foxy and I both learned years ago. Pretty sure that video is still up. Pretty sure it's the same video. There's hundreds of videos out there on YouTube. If you can't find one on YouTube, you might be able to find one somewhere else. You never really can tell. And if you can afford it, if you can find DVDs, I got this from eBay. This is the Wudon Snowflake sword form. This is a pretty good one because it has including the movie jacket in Chinese and English. I have Bagua Palm, again in English and Chinese. Now, there are some forms out there that are unfortunately really, really difficult to find DVDs for. There's a couple of Yang style Tai Chi fan forms that you can't find DVDs for. It is practically impossible. I've been trying. You can find the regular Tai Chi form, but finding the fan form is difficult. But you can find that form on YouTube. And if you can maybe use the same buddy system as learning from the book, have a friend watch the form while you're performing. You can break it down yourself into sections. It's not always the easiest thing in the world, but it is possible. There's also other websites. There's maybe Amazon, but I wouldn't do that. So that's something definitely to look into. If you're learning a form from a book, and you know the proper term, or at least close as you can relatively find, look it up on YouTube. You might get lucky. There are actually some older Shaolin forums on YouTube that have basically what would amount to a form DVD on them. It'll have the introduction, it'll show you the full form, it'll break it down into sections. You can learn slowly at your own pace, just like I can with all of these forms up here. My first staff form that I learned from my second Shifu is on YouTube. You can learn the entire form on YouTube. My first official Jian form is on YouTube. Dragon Spring Sword and the Coiling Dragon Staff are on YouTube. You can find the whole form broken down into sections, done slowly. If you can't find it, then use the book, use the buddy system. As long as it's the right book. It needs to have explanations along with the pictures to tell you where you're supposed to move, how you're supposed to move, and everything about the form. If you don't want to learn the boring history part, then that's up to you. But I think it's just as important as the form itself. So, now what should we talk about for 25 minutes? Beyond books and DVDs and videos, if you don't have access to any of those things, you're going to have a fairly hard time learning. I suppose it's possible, if you have a competent teacher, if you're learning one-on-one with someone or in a small class. But if you don't have access to books, you don't have access to DVDs or videos, you don't have access to people, you're trying to learn entirely on your own, this is one of those instances where you can't do it yourself. You just can't. There's no way, unless you're making it up yourself, in which case, have fun. But you need, as far as I'm concerned, you need the 3 pillars. You can do without 1 or 2 of them. But if you don't have any of them, you have no foundation. So pillars are obviously people, video, and text. Those are the 3 pillars. If you don't have the person, you can do with just the video and the text. If you don't have the text, you can do with the video and the person. If you just have video, it's going to be difficult. If you just have text, it'll be a little easier. But if you don't have any of them, you are relatively screwed. So, we are about 40 minutes in. Still don't really have anybody in the chat. Don't really have any questions. So I'm going to spend the next 19 minutes or so telling a little bit of a story. When I first joined a local boffer group, we built our own weapons and we went out to local parks and beat the crap out of each other with duct tape and foam wrapped PVC pipes. And the group that we were playing with at the time thought that basically Nerf swords were not padded enough for them. Yeah, explain what bopper is. Oh, it's you take a piece of PVC and some foam pipe insulation. You wrap that in duct tape and you have a vague sword form. Or weapon form, actually. They weren't always swords. But that group said you needed 3 layers between the PVC and the edge. So I had a boffer gin that looked like a fudgesicle. You had, let's see if I have a visual aid here. This is my letter opener. You had the PVC core, you had 1 layer of pipe insulation, and you had to have another layer on the outside of that. So if this is your core, your blade is about that thick. That was remarkably overkill as far as I was concerned. Excuse me. So once we left that group, I basically cut the excess insulation off. So now there was just 1 layer of foam and duct tape. I still have it. It's in the other room. When the other people in our group saw what I made, they asked for me to make them weapons. And the group that we were playing against, probably 80% of people were using 2-handed weapons, and I'm over here with 1-handed gin. So I decided to make a pair of butterfly swords. Everyone had 2-handed weapons or long weapons for some reason. I don't know. I always found that kind of odd. So I took a length of PVC, cut it in half, wrapped it in foam, and then when I got to the top up here, I had the foam twice as long as the PVC was. So when I got up to the top, I just wrapped that around so that we had more pipe insulation to protect people. And then to make the knuckle bow, I went out and found some, I think it was sprinkler tubing, like flexible sprinkler tubing. And I made the knuckle bow and the back edge and everything. And the first time that I took that weapon out on the field to fight, I wasn't holding it the way that most people would hold a butterfly sword, or I don't actually have, I guess we can use these. Most people they're going to fight butterfly sword are going to do this. They'll have this one in front, this one kind of tucked back here, or they'll be here. I like to tell this story because it entertains me. So we get to the first battle, and I have my butterfly swords. And the first person to come up against me to fight me, and this one here, let me back up a little bit. This one here, and this one down here under my elbow, just like this. I don't know why I stood like this. I have no clue what this was, but this just felt natural to me. My rear weapon right under my elbow, but still available to block the center line, anything from behind. And we had our main weapon up front. And the very first person to come up against me to fight me took one look at me, lowered their weapon, and said, "I have no idea what to do with that." And they turned around and they walked off the field. They just gave up. They're just like, okay. And they left. So there was apparently something about that particular stance that just exploded their brain, and they just completely gave up and said, "No, I'm good. We'll just next." So that always entertained me. That was an interesting, excuse me, was an interesting group of people to play with. But I think they were far too strict when it comes to, I mean, you can never be too safe, especially when you're dealing with a bunch of people that don't really know how to control. I mean, these people always went full force, full speed. There was no, I mean, the very first day, that butterfly sword thing didn't happen the first day. The very first day, I got hit in the head probably 5 times. And you're not supposed to hit people in the head. But these people had absolutely no skill with a blade. They just flailed around and people got hurt. So when we would go and do things like that, I had to almost put away a lot of my own knowledge when it comes to how to fight, because these people had no style. They had no skill. They were just, excuse me, they were just weekend warriors, for lack of a better term. So I had to basically play their game. And it kind of annoyed me, which almost explained why we haven't been back since that. And I don't even know if they're still playing. There's some interpersonal issues there that I don't even want to get into. But after maybe a month, everything broke down. People were angry at each other, and the person running it basically wanted to hand it over to someone else to have her run it. And she wanted to run it like Dungeons and Dragons and have you make up character sheets for your people. And you had to calculate how much damage your particular weapon did. And you had certain amount of hit points, and you had to yell out how much damage your weapon does if you hit someone so that they could do math in their head and figure out how many hit points they had left. And she wanted to use, the warrior, bard, rogue, thief kind of class. And I wanted to play a warrior, but not a D&D style warrior. I wanted to play like Crouching Tiger, Li Mu Bai, swordsman type warrior. And when we were discussing it at our first meeting, because only 3 or 4 people showed up, I explained that that was the kind of warrior that I wanted to play. And at first she's like, oh yeah, that's fine. Great. Whatever. And then came the first day that we were actually going to play the game. And she tried to tell me, oh, you're a warrior. Your intelligence isn't high enough for that. I was not smart enough to open a door because I was playing a warrior. My intelligence stat wasn't high enough to figure out how to pull open a door. That was the last time I played that game too. Just because you're playing a swordsman, a warrior, whatever you want to classify it as, doesn't make you stupid. Even if you wanted to play as a barbarian, it doesn't make you stupid. You can open a damn door. Finish off my tea. Well, we don't really have any questions. We don't really have anybody in the chat right now. And I'm out of tea, so I think we'll call it for today. And hopefully next time we'll have a few more people show up so that we can talk about some spooky Halloween shenanigans. So that's it for today. I will see everyone in 2 weeks. 再见。